Hola, ¿cómo estás? Hello, how are you? Hope you're having a fabulous day. Just finished a Google Meet. We did some 80s vibes. Nicole is like totally winning our dress up days. She had like the best goth look last week, so it's pretty fun. And I just want to say another kudos. I know I like wrote this on your classroom, but your guys' Lit Circle responses last week were unreal. They were so good. You guys exceeded my expectations. It's exactly what I wanted from you guys. So I really appreciate that you put in the effort and like discuss with each other and bounce ideas off each other. Like it just warms my little black teacher heart when I see things like that. Okay, so now that I've wasted almost a minute of this video, I'm going over chapters 7 and 8. Okay, so chapter 8 has a lot of important stuff in it, so I'm going to try and be as like concise as possible. So I already am apologizing if this video is longer than I mean it to be, but I mean, you can always fast forward me. I don't know the difference, so I won't take offense. Okay, so at the end of the last chapter, right, we see this like revolt against authority, and they're all kind of like splitting up, or like there's those tensions brewing. There was a crash from someone, like we know the settings during World War II, right? The boys are being evacuated most likely. That happened so often that children were sent away during the wars, like to Canada or places that there wasn't any fighting. And so that's probably what was happening here when they crashed. So there's a man hanging, like that was in a something, plane, whatever, and he's like swaying there dead. Blech. And so we'll see how that comes into play later. Okay, so chapter 7, again, consistent with like Golding's writing, a lot of like setting at the start. And Ralph and Jack are almost working together a little bit here. Like Ralph passed a message forward to Jack, and when they next came to Fruit, the whole party stopped and ate. So they're kind of like, now's a good time. Okay, bro, like planning with each other. Okay, and then on page 119, like Ralph's becoming more aware of how he misses proper society, right? He talks about he wants to cut his hair, he needs to have a proper bath, what he wouldn't do for some soap, like a toothbrush, toothpaste, his nails, like he's used to being this like prim and proper schoolboy, and now they're becoming dirtier and dirtier, and less like prim and proper. And so yeah, like page 120 is the memory of his sometimes clean self as a standard, and he's just kind of looking at everybody else and they're dirty, right? So again, them becoming increasingly more like filthy physically is also reflective of like their nature. They're becoming more like savage as well, if you can like understand and see that connection. Just hang on, close my window. Sorry. Okay, so in the middle of page 120, right, he says he discovered with a little fall of the heart that these were the conditions he took as normal now, and that he did not mind. So he's like kind of okay, or like coming to terms with the fact that like his world has changed and this is like the new normal. And then on page 121, we see good character for Simon as he's kind of like comforting to Ralph. He keeps telling him like, we'll get back home, like you'll get back to where you came from, you'll get back. And then Ralph kind of is bitterly like, what, you got a ship in your pocket, like you gotta wait for us to get out of here? And he's just saying, no, like I just know, like I feel in my heart, like you'll get back to wherever you want to be. Like he's trying to be positive, and Ralph's kind of like poo-pooing on that. But and then they kind of just like smile at each other, so that you can see they kind of have like a friendship or a bond. And then they end up seeing some droppings from the pig, so they know that they're close. And then on page 122, this like bottom paragraph here is all really good like imagery and kind of like Ralph recalling his normal life and like missing these simple things that he can no longer have, like on the island anyway. And then page 123, right, the bushes crashed ahead of them. Boys flung themselves wildly from the pig track and scrambled in the creepers screaming. So they're trying to find the pig, right? trying to hunt. That's like the main goal right now. And there's a boar. And then on the top of page 124, Ralph now is showing that he can be a successful hunter as well. He is, there. Oh, that didn't shut all the way. So top of page 124, Ralph is full of fright and apprehension and pride. So some really good descriptive words there, right? Like he's scared, doesn't know what's going to happen, but he's like, heck yeah, I got this boar almost. Okay. I hit him, like the spear stuck in. And he kind of rambles on excitedly, like, oh my God, I hit him, I wounded him, like this is so awesome. And he sunned himself in their new respect and felt that hunting was good after all. So he kind of sees this alternate way of being, like instead of being focused on the fire and like worrying about the little ones and worrying about the shelters, now it's like, ooh, I could be a hunter. Like this would be so much more fun than having responsibilities. Okay. But then Jack points out that he's been kind of wounded by trying to like jump on the boar from the boar's horns. And so they were unsuccessful in getting this boar. But Ralph is so like, but I wounded him with the spear. And so top page like 125, like he tried for their attention. And then Ralph, or Robert's pretending to be like a pig. So they're kind of like jabbing at him and he's making mock noises. And then Jack's like, make a ring. And so like they're making a ring and like acting like Robert is the pig. But you can see like this is really important here for like that mob mentality. So they're so like infatuated with making a ring, killing the pig, cut its throat, like their chant. So that again, if you're chanting something and all in a circle and like you get so wrapped up in the moment, and that's what happens with a mob mentality. You do things you wouldn't normally do, and this is definite foreshadowing for later on in the story. So Robert squealed in mock terror, then in real pain. Ow, stop it, you're hurting. So he's actually being hurt by what they're doing, but they don't even recognize or doesn't register because they're so invested in like their actions. They got his arms and legs. Ralph, carried away by a sudden thick excitement, grabbed Eric's spear and jabbed at Robert with it. Kill him! Kill him! All at once, Robert was screaming and struggling with the strength of frenzy. Jack had him by the hair and was brandishing his knife. Behind him was Roger, fighting to get close. The chant rose ritually. What a great way to describe it. What is a mob mentality? It's a ritual, right? It's you do something repetitively. As the last moment of a dance or a hunt. Kill the pig, cut his throat, kill the pig, bash him in. So this is like, they're getting way carried away, right? But that shows like their immaturity. They're boys, they're getting excited about what they're doing and not thinking clearly. And then they kind of like stop. They lay quiet, panting. So like they're out of breath, listening to Robert's frightened snivels. He wiped his face with a dirty arm and made an effort to retrieve his status. So he's trying to retrieve his status by like acting like, oh, I wasn't scared, I'm fine, right? He's trying to regain like being tough. And he's like, oh, my bum. So like he rubbed his rump and they're kind of like, oh, that was a good game. And just a game, said Ralph uneasily. I got jolly badly hurt. So they're just kind of talking about the past. And then Maurice is kind of saying we ought to have a drum. So again, like a drum would be more like ritualistic. You're in a circle, you're banging the drum, you're all chanting the same thing. That's like that mob mentality. Like they're all going to be into this vibe. Okay. And like a fire and a drum, like you can see it in your mind, right? Like this kind of ritual. And then Jack kind of makes a joke like, ooh, that'd be a fun thing for us to like do another time is have someone pretend to be a pig and like kill it. And Robert's like, no, you need a real pig because we have to kill it in the end. You can't like kill an actual person. And then Jack's kind of like, oh, let's use a little one. And everybody's like laughing. But like, would you put it past Jack? Like, would he probably use a little one eventually if he had the chance? We know he's had constant disdain for them this whole book. So he might. And then they're kind of making plans. Like, should we go back to Piggy? He's watching the little ones. Should we keep going? What should we do? And like the sun seems a little cooler so that like it's becoming evening, right? And then the rest of page 127 is kind of just like some setting and like what they're planning on doing. And yeah, like some more setting here on the top of page 128, like really vivid details and imagery described. And then so Piggy by himself huddled in a shelter that was silent except for the sounds of nightmare. We can't leave those little ones alone with Piggy, not all night. So they do feel like somewhat of a responsibility. Like, we've left Piggy to watch over the little kids. Like, it's not fair if we let him do that the whole time. And then Jack cleared his throat and spoke in a queer, tight voice. We must let anything happen to Piggy, must we? So he doesn't care about Piggy. So he's like calling them out. Like, why do you guys even care? And then they're saying, like, someone should go across the island and tell Piggy that we'll be back after dark. So, like, someone should go now and be, like, the messenger. And no one really wants to. But then Simon kind of nudges Ralph and says, like, I'll go if you like. I don't mind. So he volunteers to do it. And then as on the page 129, right, there's just the tension is still brewing between Jack and Ralph. And, like, Ralph's side, sensing the rising antagonism, understanding this was how Jack felt as soon as he ceased to lead. And they're kind of like, well, should we keep going? Should we look for the beast? And Jack's like, I don't mind going, said Jack hotly. I'll go when we get there, won't you? Would you rather go back to the shelters and tell Piggy? Like, he's so condescending and rude, right? And now it was Ralph's turn to flush, so he kind of gets embarrassed. But he spoke despairingly out of the new understanding that Piggy had given him. So because Piggy mentioned, like, hey, Jack really hates you, now Ralph's like, he does hate me, doesn't he? So he says, why do you hate me? But again, he maybe wouldn't have recognized that without Piggy, like, pointing it out. And so the top of page 130, like, the boys stirred uneasily as though something indecent had been said. The silence lengthened. So, like, the silence is deafening, right? They're kind of like, awkward. And Ralph, still hot and hurt, turned away first. So he's, like, hurt, too, so if he's hurt, that means he cares what Jack thinks, or he, like, somewhat wants his approval as well. So they see the pig trail again. And then top of page 131, like, Ralph turned back to Jack. You see, I'm going up the mountain. The words came from Jack viciously, as though they were a curse. So you have to look to, like, what the words the author uses, what descriptive language is used to imply this incident, right? He looked at Ralph, his thin body tensed, his spear held as if he threatened him. I'm going up the mountain to look for the beast. Now. And the supreme sting, the casual bitter word. Coming. Okay, so, like, challenging him again. Like, are you coming? I'm going now. So again, like, puffing out their chests, like, who's the bravest? So at that word, the other boys forgot to urge to be gone and turned back to sample this fresh rub of two spirits in the dark. The word was too good, too bitter, too successfully daunting to be repeated. So he feels like he has to, right? He's like, I don't mind. And so astonished, he heard his voice come out cool and casual, so the bitterness of Jack's taunt fell powerless. So this happens before, too. Like, Ralph, he's, like, surprised at his own response, or how his voice sounds when it comes out, even though he's scared on the inside. It comes off as so cool and collected. So Jack being, like, taunting, it falls away because he's showing he has, like, power still, or has authority, or isn't, like, weak. Continuing on. Some, like, good similes on top of page 132. And it's interesting, too, that they use, like, stirring up small devils of dust. Interesting. And so they're kind of saying, like, we're being fools, and they're in the darkness. And, like, Ralph's irritated. He's blaming Jack. And he's kind of like, well, if you don't want to go on, I'll go by myself. So, again, that's another challenge. Like, if you're too much of a sissy, like, I'll just go. And Ralph heard the mockery and hated Jack. The sting of ashes in his eyes, tiredness, fear, enraged him. Go on, then. We'll wait here. There was silence. Why don't you go? Are you frightened? So he challenges him back. Like, fine, you go. I'll stay. And then why aren't you going? Like, get going if you're so tough. Okay? And so the darkness is enveloping them, right? So on the bottom of 132, like, he knows Roger is there, but only by sound, right? He can hear everyone talking. And again, like, top page 133. So they sat, the rocking, tapping, impervious Roger and Ralph fuming. Round them, the close sky was loaded with stars, save where the mountain punched up a hole of blackness. So again, the setting is indicative of, like, why maybe Ralph is so frustrated. It's dark. They should be at the shelters. They should be with Piggy. Like, why are they fumbling around outside? And of course, they're kids in the dark, so that can be scary. And then so Jack comes down, he's shivering, he's croaking in his voice like, I saw a thing on the top. I saw a bulge thing on the mountain and it made a plop noise. And so Ralph kind of is surprised again by his bravado. So surprised with how he responds to stress and these actions. He's like, well, we'll go take a look. And for the first time he had known Jack, Ralph could feel him hesitate now. So he does notice that Jack is actually genuinely like fearful. And he's like, yes, of course. But again, his voice spoke for him. So he's constantly surprised with like, so his inside like feelings are not reflected with how he speaks and how he presents himself. We see that consistently for Ralph, which is important to note. Come here. No? Oliver's just sitting here staring at me. So yeah, top of page 134. Now that his physical voice was silent, the inner voice of reason and the other voices too made themselves heard. Piggy was calling him a kid. Another voice told him not to be a fool. And the darkness and desperate enterprise gave the night a kind of dentist's chair unreality. So beautifully written there. So yeah, his physical voice is silenced. Now the inside voices are becoming louder and he's like, what am I even doing? And so they kind of both like believe it's real, right? Like, let's creep forward on our hands and knees. Maybe it's asleep. And then he like smothers a cry. He like kind of sees this hump thing, right? Are you scared? Jack's asking him. And not scared so much as paralyzed. Hung up here, immovable, on the top of the diminishing, moving mountains. That's on page 135. And so like they see this like hump thing where no rock should be. Something like a great ape was sitting asleep with its head between its knees. The wind roared in the forest. There was confusion in the darkness, and the creature lifted its head, holding towards them the ruin of a face. So they do see something. And so he sees a thing that's like bowed or whatever, but it's dark. They do see a figure, and it scares them. Okay. And so what do you think it is? With what I've said earlier, you can kind of infer what it probably is that they've seen. But because it's dark and their imaginations are going, it's misconstrued. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 7. Chapter 8 now. Okay, so gift for the darkness. All right. So right off the bat too, we see Piggy being consistent in like being more mature and like challenging what the truth is. So he's like, are you really sure you saw something? Like, I told you a dozen times now, said Ralph, we saw it. The beast had teeth. It had big black eyes. And he's kind of like, are you sure? Are you sure that's what you saw, buddy? And he remembered the panic flight down the mountainside. And so on page 137, Jack's like asking about the hunters, right? And as long as there's light, we're brave enough. But then, and now that thing squats by the fire as though it didn't want us to be rescued. So we can't have a single fire, we're beaten. So they're like, oh, now we can't have our fire up there because that's where that thing is. And it doesn't care that there's fire. And like when it's dark is when we're scared. We're only brave when it's light out, blah, blah, blah. And so Jack's like, what about my hunters? We could take care of it. And Ralph's like, you guys are nothing more basically than boys armed with sticks. So he kind of calls him out. And so of course he takes offense to that. And like Piggy is kind of like, now you've done it. You've made fun of his hunters. Like that's gonna be the end of you. And he's like, oh, shut up. But then they hear the conch being, the sound from the conch coming. And so Ralph, it's good for symbolism for the conch on the bottom of page 137 because it's like Ralph rose obediently, right? So like they still are following that structure and that rule. That's like the one rule so far that they don't question, right? I mean, they try to have the rule about the fire, they can't really stick to it, but the conch is something that they listen to. Okay, and so so he took the conch from Jack and he's like, this meeting, and then Jack interrupted him. I called it. So again, that leadership being challenged. And so Ralph thrusts the conch in Jack's arms and sat down on the trunk. So he's like, fine, go ahead, and sits there to listen. And so Jack's like, we've seen the beast. And then on page 138, right, there's all these like rumors about the beast. Like, it comes out of the sea, it comes out of the dark, from the trees. Ah, it's waiting, it's hunting. And we can see how Jack reacts to like people questioning or like talking when he's trying to speak. Like, he's like, shut up, right? So that's very much his like leadership style. It's right there. And he turns on Ralph big time, right? He's like, Ralph said my hunters are no good. I never said that. Ralph thinks you are cowards running away from the boar and the beast, and that's not all. And so there's this audible sigh on the platform. Everyone knows what's going to happen. Everyone knows what's coming. But it's like that uncooperative silence. And they're like, he's like Piggy. He says things like Piggy. He isn't a proper chief. So he's kind of saying, calling out how Piggy's kind of like the brains or has all the ideas. So he's like, Ralph doesn't even have his own like material or ideas. And he calls him a coward. And he's saying like he didn't want to go with us to the top to like see the beastie. And he's like I went too. And then they're like, well, after we did. So he's trying to make him look weak in front of everybody else so that they'll choose him as chief. Like, he's not a hunter. He'd never have got us meat. He isn't a prefect, and we don't know anything about him. He just gives orders and expects people to obey for nothing. All this talk. So again, like, big turning point right there. It's kind of like that us versus them. Like, Jack's like, I'm a prefect, and like he has all his boys like they must have been like one class or from one school, and then like Ralph and everyone else maybe from another school. Like, they didn't have that commonality. So Jack's trying to separate himself. Like, I was a prefect. He doesn't know anything, right? So pulling from the old society to kind of give himself an edge. And then he's like, all this talk, like, who wanted this talk? Like, Jack's complaining about it. And then Ralph's like, calls him out. You called the meeting. You wanted this talk, boy. Okay, so then Jack gets red in the face. So obviously he's embarrassed. His chin sunk back. He glowered under his eyebrows. So then he asks the big question, like, who thinks Ralph oughtn't be chief? And everyone's just silent. Like no one says anything. So the silence continued, breathless and heavy and full of shame. Slowly the red drained from Jack's cheeks, then came with a painful rush. He licked his lips and turned his head at an angle so that his gaze avoided the embarrassment of linking with others' eye. So it's not the response he wanted or thought he was going to get. So he clears his voice and speaks loudly. And then on top of page 140, like, he says, all right then. And he has like tears in the corner of his eyes because he's so humiliated. I'm not going to play any longer, not with you. So this is the first... might be the first, but you keep hearing the boys refer to like, I'm not going to play with you. I'm not going to play with you. This isn't fun. So it's like questioning, like, do they still see this as like a game? And they're like, well, I don't play with you anymore, like a child. Or is this their real life? Like, are they looking at through the lens of like, this is all a game, hunting, making shelters. Like, it's not serious life. Whereas Piggy sees it as like reality. Like, we need a fire. We need to get rescued. And they're all like, this isn't fun. I don't want to make a shelter. This isn't fun. I'm going to go roll boulders. Right? So it's really separating like the boys from the men, or like who is more mature and who's not. Yeah. So he's saying like, I'm not going to be a part of Ralph's group anymore, or Ralph's lot. So he kind of leaves. And anyone who wants to hunt when I do can come too. So he leaves the open invitation. And so he has a steady stream of tears as he like leaves, and Ralph kind of just watches him go. And then on page 142, like, Piggy was indignant. So meaning, like, he's just showing annoyance towards maybe some unfair treatment. But he's like, meh, kind of probably feels like he deserves it. And he's happy that Jack's gone. Because he says, right, like, we can do without Jack Merridew. There's others besides him on this island. So he does care about everybody else. It's like, he's not the only one. We've got other things to do. And so now that we've really got a beast, though, I can't hardly believe it. So he still has his doubts because he's realistic. He's like, what should we do? And it's like, there's no help, Piggy. Nothing to be done. And they kind of sit in this depressed silence is how it's described. So like a great way to describe it. And then Simon comes up. And he's just trying to help. Poor Simon. Like, he's just trying to be friendly, right? He's nervous. He takes the conch like he's going to speak. And he's just... like, maybe we should climb the mountain, right? And they're kind of like, Like, why? Like, what's the good of climbing up to the beast when the other two, like Ralph and everyone else, couldn't do anything? Like, we can't do anything either. And then Simon's like, well, what else is there to do? Like, they're like, what else is, well, we have no other options. And then he kind of retires away, like he's embarrassed, like his ideas didn't matter. And so now Piggy is speaking now with, on the bottom of page 141, more assurance. He's gained this confidence, right? The others would have recognized his pleasure. Like, he's happy to speak in front of everybody. He feels like he has a bit more power because Jack's gone and can't, like, talk down to him anymore. And so, again, he reiterates, we need smoke. We need fire. That's the most important thing. And Ralph is like, no, Piggy, we've got no fire. That thing sits up there. We'll have to stay here. So because the beastie's up there, they're too, like, frightened to go up there, so they have to stay down where their shelters are. And then Piggy is like, well, we could make a fire here. There's still going to be smoke. We don't need it to be up there. And then a great quote, too, like, on 142, right in the middle here. It's like, only Piggy could have the intellectual daring to suggest moving the fire from the mountain. Like, whoa, light bulb. Like, such a small idea. But Piggy's the only one that has that intellect and that, like, maturity. And so, like, the greatest ideas are the simplest at the bottom of page 142. Now there was something to be done, and they worked with passion. Piggy was so full of delight and expanding liberty in Jack's departure, so full of pride in his contribution to the good of society that he helped fetch wood. So, like, he feels like he has purpose. Society is, like, creating, right? They have a job to do now. They feel purposeful. So even he's, like, helping. And, like, the little ones are even happy. The twins are helping. Like, it's an exciting idea that they're going to have a fire down there now. And then Piggy himself takes off his glasses to, like, make the fire. So that's, like, him choosing to use his tool to help. And he's like, we could experiment with different, like, leaves, see which produces the best smoke. And then on page 144, like, throughout this part here, we see, like, different boys are kind of disappearing, so we can infer that they are leaving to be with Jack or to go help him hunt. So, like, where's Bill and Roger? I expect they've gone. I expect they won't play either. So again, using the word play like it's a game, right? They don't want to play anymore. And they're kind of like, well, we can do all right, can't we? And the twins, and Piggy, they're like, kind of like, yeah, let's go. And they gather all this fruit for Ralph to be like, look, we're fine. We can have a feast ourselves. We can have a fire. We don't need Jack Merridew. Who's that? Okay, and then Ralph's, like, grateful, like, thank you. That's actually so nice. And then they can't find Simon, and so they're assuming he's climbing the mountain. And he's kind of like, he's cracked. Like, they're kind of thinking that he's losing it. And so Simon's, like, walking along. Butterflies are dancing. How nice. So that's on top of page 146. And the other time, the air had seemed to vibrate within the heat, but now it threatened. So again, really nice figurative language there and very looming of, like, foreshadowing. Okay, so then it talks about Jack, and he's like, we're gonna hunt. I'm the chief. And we're going to forget about the beast. Who cares? We're just going to focus on getting a pig. And he's, like, astonished by their favor. So he's, like, shocked by their willingness to, like, listen to him and, like, do what he says. He's like, oh, all right, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And they agreed passionately out of the depths of their tormented private lives. So they're kind of like, he's saying, we're not going to dream down here, dream big about being rescued. We're going to just be realistic and, like, hunt and just live in the moment. And so they're not going to, like, focus on being rescued. And then he has the idea of, like, if we kill something, let's leave some for the beastie to, like, make it happy. And then he turned and trotted away, and after a moment, they followed him obediently. So we're seeing, like, how these boys now are following him as a leader, and that's on 147. And then they're going along, and, like, so sad, but they see a sow, and she's the largest in the lot. And it's so sad, right? Right about here. It's like on page 147, a little apart from the rest, sunk in deep maternal bliss. like deep maternal bliss, like just so happy to be a mom, nursing her babes, just chilling. She was black and pink, and the great bladder of her belly was fringed with a row of piglets that slept or burrowed and squeaked. So she's like this peaceful, loving, nursing mother, just living her life. And then Jack's like, this one, and he kind of signals to everybody, and he's like, now. So they all kind of go after her, and one thing you could note on the bottom of that page is like one piglet with a demented shriek rushed into the sea, trailing Roger's spear behind it. So just like Roger earlier when he was like throwing stones at Henry and like the notion that he could hurt him if he wanted, or he could kill him if he wanted, because he's like small and innocent and like no one is going to do anything about it. It's like the same thing. Like he's meant to be going after this sow, and he kind of like is enjoying maybe like if he hits a piglet, like haha. So Roger's definitely a little cracked. Not so much Simon. Okay. So 148, they're just like hunting, chasing the sow, trying to kill her. And it's really sad. Like for me, I love pigs and this just hurts my feelings. But on page 148, it describes her like trying again and again to like escape, and she's being stabbed, and she spurted with her last strength and held ahead of them again. And it's a definite like juxtaposition right here, because she's like dying and bleeding and being butchered, but it says like the open space, there's bright flowers and butterflies dancing around each other. The air's like hot and still. So the setting is an opposite of like what's happening to this pig. So it's like enhancing and exemplifying like what's going on. And then the dreadful eruption from an unknown world made her frantic. She squealed and bucked, and the air was full of sweat and noise and blood and terror. Roger ran over the heap, prodding with his spear whenever pig flesh appeared. So again, like the overkill. And again, Roger, like every time he sees flesh, he's just, ah, right? So not really realizing like, okay, it's dying. Like you don't like pause, take a break. And then Jack's on top, stabbing down with his knife. And Roger, again's like leaning on the pig with all his weight. The spear moved forward inch by inch, and the terrified squealing became a high-pitched scream. Then Jack found the throat, and the hot blood spouted over his hands. The sow collapsed under them, and they were heavy and fulfilled upon her. The butterfly still danced, preoccupied in the center of the clearing. So again, that juxtaposition of like the butterflies and everything's like la la la, but like what's really going on is like so violent. And they kill her. And then like they're rubbing blood on their faces, and they're like laughing, and like they're just acting wildly from now like having this blood. They're like ha ha ha, and like ah, and like talking about like where they stabbed her, right? It's so violent, and they're not like appreciative of like hunting or like that they were able to get it. So just showing their immaturity too. And now that they've like killed this creature too, like a bit of loss of innocence, like this violence pouring out from them. So like no respect whatsoever for death. And so they're talking about like where they stabbed her, right? And like Maurice's acting of the pig's efforts to avoid the advancing spear was so funny that the boys cried with laughter. So they're mimicking like this pig trying to survive. And I think it's so funny. So again, like immaturity and no respect for living things, or that they've like gained a meal. They should be like thanking the pig and not like mocking its death. And so Jack's kind of cutting it up, so he's not scared of blood now like he was earlier. And so Jack is the new leader, but he's a bit incompetent because they're like, how do we make a fire? Like, we got this pig now. How are we going to have a feast? So he decides, he squatted and he's like frowning. He's like, we'll raid them and take fire. So they're going to like attack the other camp or like raid it and steal fire. And they're going to paint their faces. So typically when I teach this too, we talk about more into like the mob mentality and how like masks or face paint like hides your true intentions or makes you feel more brave, brazen, bold to do things. So that's definitely what's going on here. And then they're planning on like leaving the head cut off for the beastie as like a sacrifice. sharpening a stick at both ends, which you might hear again later. So page 150, like Jack held up the head, jammed the soft throat down on the pointed end of the stick, which pierced through into the mouth, and a little blood is dribbling down, and they kind of like leave the guts there to rot, and there's like the buzzing of flies. And now you can see the setting. It's more like silent and no like butterflies, okay, because it's like there's that smell of death and decay. And then in the silence, standing over the dry blood, they look suddenly furtive. So page 151. So it's like they're all kind of avoiding attention and eye contact out of guilt. So maybe they're now realizing like we acted way out of control. Overkill. We were so like ruthless. So they're all like kind of awkward now. So again, that realization like, ooh, we got carried away, that mob mentality. And then Jack spoke loudly, the head is for the beast, it's a gift. The silence accepted the gift and awed them. And so the head remains there, blood blackening between the teeth. And then they run towards the beach. And then Simon's like hiding, concealed in the leaves, and the sow's head still remained like an after image. The half-shut eyes were dim with infinite cynicism of adult life. So that loss of innocence, very prevalent there. And that's on page 151. And then Simon discovered that he had spoken aloud. He opened his eyes quickly, and there was the head grinning amusedly in the strange daylight, ignoring the flies, the spilled guts, even ignoring the indignity of being spiked on a stick. So it feels like he's being, the beast is, or the pig's head is like staring at him. And so he starts to feel kind of like sick, or like he has a bit of a headache. And so he's like, something you ate perhaps. Go back, child, said the head silently. So it's like he can hear this head speaking, but he's not feeling well. And if you've read the end of the chapter, like he does pass out. So who knows what's ailing him? It could be a seizure. It could be like food poisoning. There's something going on. So yeah, the bottom of page 151, even the butterflies deserted the open space where the obscene thing grinned and dripped. So it just reeks of death. Simon lowered his head, carefully keeping the eyes shut, and then sheltered them with his hand. Okay, so this part up here is really important, right? With the Lord of the Flies speaking. And there's the pile of guts, the black blob of flies that buzz like a saw. So basically, the Lord of the Flies, like it's grinning at them, and it does begin to speak to Simon. Like on page 158. So basically what the Lord of the Flies is, like you think of flies, you think of death, like decaying, dying, rotting, and like it's also reflective of like their decaying and dying innocence and pureness and goodness as children. Like the dirtier they are physically, the dirtier they are on like the inside, and their good nature as human beings is withering away and dying with how they're starting to treat each other, and it gets worse. So basically the beastie, like the Lord of the Flies, this whole thing is reflective of like the violence they have in their hearts and in their souls, like the evil that's lurking. So even like the devil, right? It's reflective of like the most evil, sinister things of nature. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If not, like watch that Spark Notes video I shared. But even like that ancient, inescapable recognition, it's like the devil, like himself, like that ancient, like you know evil when you see it. And then Simon, his pulse began to beat on the brain, so he's having a headache, there's something physically like wrong with him, that he's like ill. Okay, and then on page 153, like Piggy's bringing up like, okay, I know Sam and Eric are twins and they do everything together, but things would get done more effectively if they split up. And again, Ralph's like, that's a good idea. Never would have thought of that. Like, and he says that. Like, Ralph considered this and understood. He was vexed to find how little he thought like a grown-up and sighed again. The island was getting worse and worse. So he knows he's like such a child compared to Piggy's ideas, and Piggy is more mature than the rest of them. And then he's saying, like, I'm scared, not of the beast, but I mean, I'm scared of that too, but nobody else understands about the fire. If someone threw you a rope when you were drowning, if a doctor said, take this, because if you don't take it, you'll die, you would, wouldn't you? I mean, of course I would. Can't they see? Can't they understand? Without the smoke signal, we'll die. Look at that. So again, the importance of the smoke, like he has that idea clear in his mind and makes great comparisons. Like if a doctor said take this or you'll die, you're going to take it, right? If you're drowning, you need a ladder. And then he says, what's more, I don't sometimes. Supposing I got like the others, not caring, what'd become of us? So he feels alone in his plight of like caring about the situation. And so Piggy took off his glasses, deeply troubled. I don't know, Ralph. We just got to go on. That's all. That's what grown-ups would do. So again, that like society, right? Trying to think of like what would adults do in this situation. Okay, just a few pages left. So page 154. So the forest near them burst into uproar. Demonic figures with faces of white and red and green rushed out howling, so the little ones fled screaming. And so interesting choice of words, right? So this is page 154 of like demonic. I was just talking about the devil, was I not? Right? So how that's like, like the author's purposefully choosing these descriptive words because they're all face painting and they're doing a like heinous act or like not being kind. And so that's very reflective of like devilish nature, right? So they look demonic too. They're embodying that idea. Okay, and so they can tell that it's Jack and the boys and they're stealing the fire. And so again, the masks are like hiding your intentions or hiding like how you're truly feeling, or it makes you feel more like a part of something and like brave. So he was safe from shame or self-consciousness behind the mask of his paint and could look at each of them in turn. So that's the bottom of page 154. So that mob mentality like makes you brave, right? Like his face is hidden. And he says, tonight we're having a feast. We've killed a pig. We've got meat. You can come if you like. So he does invite them. And then you can tell that he's like forcing the other boys to be like, the chief has spoken. Like they don't really want to say it. He like says, go on now, go on, like say it. Show them I'm the boss, which we know is not good leadership skills. And again, like, aren't they having fun? Like, it's a game. That's on page 155. Like, this is real life. It's not a game. You're not children, but that's how they're seeing it. And then when I saw Jack, I was sure he'd go for the conch. Can't think why. So does the conch still have power? The group of boys looked at the white shell with affectionate respect. So that'd be great for your charts, for your symbolism. And that's like 155, 156. So seeing the familiar symbol started to come back and they feeling the need for a ritual. So they themselves need something to like practice or bring them together, that societal type moment of having an assembly. And then on page 156 as well, Ralph saying, the fire is the most important thing. Without the fire, we can't be rescued. I'd like to put on war paint and be a savage, but we must keep the fire burning. The fire is the most important thing on the island because, and then Piggy's like, because we'll be rescued. Because he's kind of like forgetting himself. He's like, oh yes, we'll be rescued. So again, it's like he sees the fun in like painting your face, trying to kill pigs. Like, woo, that's way more fun. But Piggy's reminding him like, we need to be like an adult. Like we need to get rescued. That's the most important thing. And then even on the top of page 157, being savages, I mean, it must be jolly good fun. Like, again, it's like a fun game instead of having to be realistic and like do the chores. But they're thinking of the meat and the little ones are like drooling. They're like, ooh, yay. And then all the Lord of the Flies like speaking to Simon, you're a silly little boy, an ignorant silly little boy. And again, his tongue is swelling. So obviously something's physically wrong again, whether it's a seizure, food poisoning, whatever, something's going on. You better run off and play with the others. So again, that play, that like fun, they think you're batty. You like them, don't you? Like he's kind of pulling out his insecurities and like taunting him with it. And then his mouth labored, like his breathing, like something's going on. He's like pig's head on a stick, like kind of calls it out. But he's saying on page 158, fancy thinking the beast was something you could hunt and kill, said the head. For a moment or two, the forest and all the other dimly appreciated places echoed with the parody of laughter. You knew it, didn't you? I'm part of you. Close, close, close. I'm the reason why it's no go. Why things are what they are. So again, the Lord of the Flies is like pig's head. It's in all of them. It's the negative human qualities that do we all possess, right? Are we inherently good in nature or not? It's this evil that they have in their hearts and this violence in their hearts. Like, I'm a part of all of you, and this is why things are falling apart. This is why you're not working together, because of their own actions. And it's like expanding, and it's described as having like the voice of a schoolmaster, so that would be like authoritative, right? And so like, I'm warning you, you're not wanted, you're all gonna have fun. This is all about fun, don't be misguided. So again, the Lord of the Flies is like prodding at them for like not being serious. He's like, you're gonna have fun, and nobody even cares about you, like bringing out insecurities again. And then the top of page 159, like the end of the chapter, Simon found he was looking into the vast mouth. There was blackness within, a blackness that spread. So again, black would equal evil. Like, think of the color symbolism there. And Simon was inside the mouth. He fell down and lost consciousness. So whatever Simon's like suffering from, he passes out. Okay, so that's the end of that. So I'll do one for like 9, 10, and then 11 and 12 next week. I hope you found that helpful. I know it's long, sorry, but again, you can like skip over. I'm not upset. But yeah, that's all. And if you have any questions, let me know. And I hope you guys have a fabulous day. Goodbye.